Mateo, what's up, dude? You've been out there, you've been talking with the developers, and I feel like I know quite a bit about agents, but you're the guy on the front line. So I wanted to lay the foundation and say, let's get into all the agent talk that you've been hearing from people that are out there building agents. You were talking a bit about what you've seen recently. So tell me, man.
Yeah. I interact a lot with people that are building agents and they want to go to production, and some of them are in production. And I guess the common pattern that I see from people that are, I would say, more advanced in this is that they are moving away from chat interfaces. And that's very interesting to me because I agree like fervently with this. I think the chatbot is here because we inherited that from this sort of like momentum that LLMs have with us. Like our interactions with LLMs are on text. So text is the main kind of medium with which we communicate with LLMs. And but an agent is so much more, right? So the kind of abstract concept of agents is, this intelligent thing, entity, that operates on within an environment, and that environment currently is the internet. Um, and through the internet, I guess, like to the wider kind of real world, quote unquote.
Yeah.
And there are so many ways in which we interact with things in the world. And if you like want to go philosophical, we humans are agents in the world, right? So in that sense, if you think about the ideal agent, maybe as portrayed in movies and so on, you would expect to kind of gravitate towards something like Jarvis, maybe, right? So it's some entity that is maybe not corporeal, um, that is present in multiple interfaces. It's not just a chat, right? Of course, there will be some sort of like interaction, and the agent needs prompting, and because we are dealing with LLMs, that will require some translation to text more often than not. There are like voice to voice agents and image agents, all of that. But I'm very excited to see people moving away from chatbots and going into more sophisticated UIs, right?
What is
So
sophisticated? Yeah, I wanna hear what is the next level past chatbots, because I've been saying this for a while too, and I know folks that have a lot of problems with user adoption for the non-technical folks, because when you prompt something or you're using a chatbot and it's the gateway to the agent, and the user asks the agent to do something, but then the agent isn't able to complete that task. It's like, is it because the user didn't ask it correctly? Is it because the agent can't actually do it? There's a lot of product misconceptions, and so what happens is that the user gets tired of trying to prompt its way into getting the agent to do what it needs to do, and it turns out that it's a horrible user experience.
absolutely, I think there are two main components there, and we can extrapolate this from like the early web, maybe. Um, like if you imagine, like I don't know, for some of my government's websites are horrible, and we can see kind of like the momentum of the 90s maybe in my government's websites. And now websites are very good. They are kind of like they're still maturing, they're still evolving. Like there are patterns that are coming and are nicer and are faster and all of that. Um, and in a similar way, agents have this kind of old feeling maybe if they are stuck in chat mode, right? And what it looks like to kind of be beyond chats to me at the moment is mostly ambient agents that they just go and fetch context automatically, right? The kind of starting or booting of this agent is still fairly textual and fairly active from the user's point of view. I need to log into the agent. I need to log into third-party services through the agent, allow it to get my context, and all of that. But then if it's set up correctly, it will just do stuff on
Yeah.
my behalf,
But
right?
but this is when you're building that type of an agent, you need to be taking screenshots every second to analyze and know, like, can I jump in?
Maybe, and that touches in one of the key components of agent design, which is when do we bother the human to achieve the task, right? So human in the loop is a big part of this, and like interrupts are a big part of this. Um, Especially for ambient agents that maybe they have some intelligent retry or whatever, or some policy to retry. But then it's like, okay, we fail at this so many times that it's time to notify the human, say, hey, I'm struggling here. So just like give me some more context that I can use to maybe fill this email or this form or whatever uh, correctly, right?
Yeah. And that kind of segues into this other conversation that I know we wanted to get to, which was more around how you're structuring the agent and how you're creating these loops. Like React came out and it was very popular. And then it was like, wait, React might not be the best way to do it. And so I know that you've been seeing different folks having success with different ways. Can you break that down?
Sure. So React, I like to use now more than the original kind of 2002 sort of slash three uh, paper, like React paper,
Tw
where
Wait,
it
wait,
was,
wait.
yeah.
Dude, you're going way back. 2002?
No, 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 sorry, 2022. I'm sorry. Yeah, sorry.
I know,
So
that's why for a
yeah,
second there, I was like, "Did I miss out on a whole movement that was happening when I was a wee child?"
yeah, no, no, no. This is like 20 years after that, but actually, like that is inspired on kind of the meta architecture that is planning and acting, right? Which is, if you go very early computer science days of agents, this is the kind of main loop of perception and actuation, right? So you sense from the environment, you do the thinking, which is the planning step or whatever, and now yes, we replaced like the brain, the static, persistence brain and all of that with an LLM that has more non-deterministic behaviors and so on, but it's still an agent in the core architecture, right? So React to me is um, a very good idea because we leverage prompt engineering patterns about like chain of thought and all of that, and then action through tools, right? And now we see this kind of spectrum where you have the LLM thinking on its own, maybe with reasoning models, all of that, patterns like think tools that the LLM can just use to kind of meditate for a little bit, come up with a better context or a better plan. And then we see names applied to these that are they want to differentiate from like the vanilla React maybe, but they are the same pattern, right? They are planning and execution, plan and execute patterns, right? And you have like voyage and train of thoughts and tree of thought and like all of these kind of versions of these, but these are just flavors of planning and action, right? So sure, we are clever about how we sense the world, we are clever about how we act upon the world, but then at the end of the day, you are truly doing context engineering in the brain side of the agent, right? And you enlarge it with memory, you enlarge it with reactivity, all of that, reflection maybe. But the pattern, the overarching pattern is we need a step to think and a step to act, right? And so to answer your question directly, I don't think we are um, getting into like a super novel agent architecture necessarily. So I think agentic patterns are more interesting to look at. For example, how we activate the agent, how we interact with the agent. These are having a lot of innovation around them. Like ambient agents is a cool one. The research, all of that. How many loops we have. Maybe calling stuff in parallel to get the context, how to prioritize this, combining a bit of the LLM sort of like free non-deterministic behavior with symbolic like logic executions. Like, for example, a very powerful pattern that I see is we get the LLM to generate a plan, but like a vanilla React would just say, okay, execute the plan, go ahead. Like, I trust you, right? Um, a smarter approach is, hold on, is this plan actually feasible? Is it possible? Does it make sense to call these tools in this sequence or with this dependency tree, maybe, right? So that is an open problem still, but a lot of it can be solved um, by having a symbolic kind of, okay, dependency tree inference, right? And SymPy or all of these kind of symbolic execution toolkits can help you greatly there. So it's a combination of LLMs and like a classical machine learning, if you wish.
Yeah, I know that whenever we talk to Sam, the CTO of Arcade, he bangs the drum about how we need to give the LLMs less scope and we need to try and be as deterministic as possible. Have you seen ways where you can add determinism?
Yeah, this is a discussion also in the agentic sphere, maybe, about the spectrum that divides truly quote unquote agentic behavior and like static workflows, maybe, right? And you know, like workflows are sort of more deterministic in the sense that you freeze or you establish the steps that need to happen for a specific task. And some of these may involve LLMs to be creative in how, to choose the parameters, how to kind of massage the context and get the parameters for the tools, all of that. Um, and then a truly agentic, like if I'm a very purist LLM agentic person, I would say, no, no, no. The LLM needs to think on its own and like come up with all of these solutions. And there are, you go into like the more, you know, reinforcement learning, sort of like let's optimize for the environment that the agent is on, sort of kind of, heal maybe. To me, I am more on the SAM hill in this case, where I do think that LLMs are very powerful, but they are also kind of dangerous because they hallucinate, and we cannot. Um, I mean, they display something similar to intelligence, but is they are not truly thinking, right? So they are generating tokens and they are generating models in the classical machine learning sense, and therefore we can use them. They're very powerful, um, but it's not the only hammer in the toolbox. So we should use, the early classifiers. We should use just maybe deep learning, whatever. It feels old now, but deep learning and even clustering algorithms. You know, all of the machine learning toolbox is still available, right? So why not use it?
Uh-huh. It's so true. This makes me think about something that you said before we hit record, which was like LLMs are adversarial. Can you go down that thought a little bit?
Sure. So one of the main hurdles I see from agent builders and that I help them with is trusting the LLM. And this is, I think it comes from um, you feel that you control the system because you are in charge of calling the API, in charge of like running the model. Maybe it's on your GPU, whatever. So you feel that you contain the thing, right? But that is not necessarily true, right? So it's a non-deterministic component of your system. And because it's non-deterministic, you cannot truly predict how it's going to behave. And that's a problem for security. So if, the kind of naive idea of let me expose the API credentials or whatever to the LLM, but I'm gonna also give it like an email tool or whatever, and I just let it run, right? 99% of the cases, it's gonna hallucinate the token, or it may introduce that piece of the context into an email, send it to someone. So it's a huge security risk, right? In that sense, if you want to put the guardrails on your agent, you shouldn't treat the LLM as an internal component that is auditable, right? You can test it, you can eval all of that, but that is to ensure that the tasks that you are thinking about are achievable. It doesn't guarantee that someone is going to like prompt inject something into the input, into the context, which is so easy to do, right?
Well, I inadvertently prompt inject myself all the time. It's not even I don't need somebody else. I do it myself. And you probably saw recently there's been a lot of times where people will talk about how the LLM deleted a code base or deleted a database or whatever. And I was talking to a friend and he was saying, yeah, we've all been there where we let an LLM loose and then we thrashed our code base, just absolutely destroyed it because either you're generating a ton of code and changing a lot of files, and then later you got to go back and in the PR review, you got to figure out like, what did I just vibe code here? So a little bit of a detour, but I feel you on that. We can prompt inject the hell out of it ourselves.
Yeah, like the same way we put guardrails on our own code and our own code bases, all of that. And for vibe coding is one thing, but also like imagine it's a production agent, right? So if I'm vibe coding, it's on my computer, it's maybe will delete my files or whatever, it will crash my computer. But if I do that on a server with real data and with actual consequences, that's a pro. That's a massive problem, right? And I deleted like client databases before, right? Like it's a human thing, and we consider ourselves intelligence to have these sort of mistakes. We somehow attribute only the intelligent parts to the LLM, but not like all of the mistakes and hallucinations. And we are aware of this, and we should be more responsible about it.
Another friend of mine was saying, yeah, it's pretty wild how right now we're very okay with LLMs having read access to a lot of stuff, and we are not yet okay with letting them have write access.
Correct.
So the other piece that I think is worth us getting into is something that you told me, which is that auth right now is the biggest blocker to getting agents into production. And it kind of feels like this dovetails into everything we've just been talking about.
To act in the real world, so the real world is environment, right? And in our environment, we need security. We've learned this the hard way in the early days of the web, where banks and all of these systems were hacked, and we needed increasing levels of security and like cryptography, all of that. That is also true if we want to put an agent to act on our behalf. So they need to be able to use our tools and all of our stuff to get the context, and we need the guardrails and the policies to make them um, act on our behalf in a way that we can be sure that the side effects are controlled. I don't want an agent with access to my credit card and unlimited power to just go and be prompt injected into spending all my money into crypto or whatever, right? So yeah, like I mean, I'm happy that the agent wants to make me money, maybe or whatever, but it can also just spend it all somewhere. It can gamble with my money. I don't want that, right? So in that sense, we need to leverage the you know robust systems that we have in place to allow the agent to act in this environment securely. The same way we do it, right? So if I go and I want to read my email, I need to consent, give my password, my passkey, all of that to access that data, right? And I need to hit send on the email, all of that, right? So, but you know, at this point, because I'm me, right? Um, That's all right. We assume that's consent, right? The agent is a different entity that is gonna act on my behalf. I don't want an hallucinated recipient on an email. Maybe the information on that email is sensitive or whatever. I want to know who's getting the email. I want to be the one that approves, right? And I can, put this in policies. It doesn't need to be always human in the loop. I can say, whatever. If you're sending an email to Demetrios, I trust Demetrios, just send whatever, right? Even if it's confidential or whatever, I can fix it later. But that's my choice, right?
Uh-huh.
So that is the main thing that prevents like agents from being out there because of it's hard. Like I can deal with off maybe once correctly. I as a human, as a developer, right? Then I need to integrate to Google and to SAML and to Okta and to all of these different things for each of the services that I want my agent to use. And that's really difficult and that requires a lot of engineering and it requires a security expert, right? So if I am vibe coding my agent, I am probably not a security expert, right?
Well,
And these security experts at this level are very expensive to hire. So I want a solution that will unlock the ability of my agent to act on my behalf truly, to be useful, without compromising that security. And I mean, we can do that.
and when you say that you can add in policies, how are you adding those in? Just in the prompt and you're adding this context like, oh, from these people, I trust them, or is it something that you add in a different way?
You absolutely should not add this into the prompt. so you so the place where you put this is what I call the agent runtime, right? So it's the application that contains the LLM, right? So the LLM will express some intent to send an email to Demetrius, right? Demetrius is on my whitelist, so therefore I allow that tool to be called, to be executed, right? So the invocation of the tool happens. I put a policy barrier there. And then the tool execution happens after, only if that is approved.
Yeah, I've heard about use cases of folks that are like, I instantly am thinking about these guys that I talked to called Happy Robot, and they are creating voice agents for truckers and suppliers. There's like this two-sided marketplace where the suppliers need their loads moved from one city to the next. And a lot of times, the truckers have a much easier time calling than trying to do things through the website. Although you have this bulletin board of a website that says, this load needs to be moved from this city to this city, and here's how much we'll pay, that kind of thing. But what ends up happening is that the truckers will call in to whoever posted that load, and then they'll try and negotiate, or they'll try and figure out the details, et cetera, et cetera. And so Happy Robot's trying to make a lot of that interaction happen with a voice agent. And I instantly asked, well, sweet. So if I'm a trucker and I know how to prompt inject, I'm going to get the best deals ever. And he was like, no, 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 it doesn't work like that. We have policies in place and we have just like this API. The agent doesn't actually know how much it is. It just is able to call the API and then the API gives it the answer. And I was like, I still feel like you could probably ask the voice agent really nicely to give you a better deal and maybe you get somewhere with it.
I mean, you can get the agent to try, right? So the LLM, if you prompt engineer your way into its brain or whatever, you can have it, send an email to evil Demetrius or whatever, right? All of the time, like that. That's it. Right? Like it's gonna try, right?
Mm.
If the policy is outside of the LLM's control, that's where the whitelist is living. Right? So it's in the runtime outside of the LLM. So the tool invocation will say, agent whatever wants to send an email to Demetrius. Is this in the and it's an if statement, right? So it's a totally deterministic thing. It's not no agent is involved or no LLM is involved into making that decision, right?
Mhm.
If it's not in my whitelist, I'm gonna reject this or I'm gonna ask the human, right? So
Then it gets escalated up, and then you get these it's like, "Why is this trucker trying to get this deal from the agent?" And then you see who's trying to use their prompt injection course that they've read over at Reddit during the weekend. There is the topic of how tool calling enables agency, but do you feel like we covered that?
I think we did. I think because agents need to act on the real world and they think that they live in the digital container of some kind.
Yeah.
They need function calling to do anything that is not just generate text.
Mm.
So the containing architecture or the containing like the supporting infrastructure for that are tools, right?
Yeah.
The LLM cannot actually send an email, right? So it needs to invoke a tool, that tool needs to be approved, then executed, and then the email goes out, right? So
There's something that I'm not sure I totally understand, and it's companies that I've seen that are trying to almost create these sandbox environments for agents. Have you seen any of that?
I've seen it for coding, because of people were, scared of breaking their computers, which I think, if you give free reins to an LLM, it may delete important stuff. So for that use case, I think it's nice. I've seen people vibe code, give free reins into like a BPS or something to an agent and give it, $100 or whatever, do something with it, and it can decide on its own, right? So it has some budget, go ahead and spend it or whatever. It's interesting, but I don't definitely not for the wider audience, right? It's an experiment.
Yeah. Yeah. Sweet. I also just saw this new vibe coding tool that came out that after it creates the code, it will run the code and then it will use a web agent to click around on the app that it created to make sure that everything's working as it should be. And I thought that was a pretty nifty way of doing verification because I know that verifying that the code does what you want it to do is one of the hardest pieces in the whole coding agent ecosystem.
Yeah, I think a pattern like that is interesting, but I don't think it's the right way to test a software, right? So the testing is the barrier where if I wanted to build a application fully agentic, right? I don't care about the programming language. I don't care about anything. I just require it to run on an iPhone and to not leak my data, all of that. My only job is to define the problem and set the evals.
Mhm.
And I can let the agent go ham on the code, right? It's gonna do whatever. It's gonna I mean, assuming I have a lot of money, right? So it's gonna go spend all of these tokens and then change the code until it passes all of the tests, right? But the tests it's the truly like test driven development, if you wish. It's just that you have this, you know, unlimited token generation power to shape the code until you pass all of this stuff, right?
Yeah, that sounds like a fun weekend.
Yeah, writing tests is the thing that I was trying to do.
Exactly. Sweet, man.